Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to Promethean Actions Live question and answer show. My name is Adam Sturmond. I'm joined with the lovely Barbara Boyd and Susan Kokinda. Thank you for allowing us a break last week as I moved myself across country. I'm now here in Southern California in San Diego County. So much happened over the last 2 weeks. I want to set the stage. I'm going to let Barbara open up the show in just a minute, but I just want to go through and just set the stage with some stuff that Donald Trump has been talking about. So the title of today's show was Netanyahu Begs, Trump Refuses, and Fauci's Diaries Come True. So in true Trump fashion yesterday, in his meetings with both Netanyahu and Zelensky, they were both excellent, productive meetings, right? Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu of Israel, along with myself and representatives, had a very good meeting. Obviously, many important subjects were discussed. So here you see him with Netanyahu, all smiles. Again, Zelensky, great honor to meet with President Zelensky of Ukraine. Many things were discussed. The meeting went very well, President Donald J. Trump. Okay. Then let's switch here over to Fauci. And let's everyone just remember this here. Fauci told everyone he was a great baseball player. So I assumed he would easily be able to throw a ball over home plate. It turns out he was a phony on that.
Dr. Fauci, when you're ready, it's your pitch.
Oh my God. Let me just play that again. Dude, what a liar. Man, look, he never played. Oh my gosh. Doctor, that's literally, any true American's going to see that and just flinch. That's just terrible. And then last two things here before I open up to Barbara. Congratulations to the great Jay Clayton on his confirmation by the Senate, next Director of National Intelligence. So Clayton looks like he's about to be coming in. And finally, just as a side note here, the Massey Massacre in the great Commonwealth of Kentucky has had a really great impact on Senator Rand Paul, who will be running in 2 years. He's been terrific lately, President Donald J. Trump. So I set the stage there a little bit with what Trump's been talking about. Barbara, the floor is yours.
Well, we obviously had the complete humiliation of the guy who doesn't know how to pitch yesterday in the United States Senate. And, you know, it was something of a fine, whipping by the Senate. But it underlined, and you can see the clips if you really want to take some pieces out of Fauci's hide. The senators did that amply yesterday in various ways, including the use of, numerous expletives to talk about him as in who the F do you think you are, from Senator Bernie Moreno, which is not really normal senatorial language, to say the least. But, it begs the question, first of all, Adam, let's just play a little bit of a portion of Rand Paul's opening statement, because I think it's useful because it grounds people not just in the whipping and what's going to happen now, but the actual reasons, the things we found out about what's actually happened.
You said you wanted me to start at around the 6-minute mark. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it should be right about here.
Between mammals. This was the tipping point. This is when others became worried. You funded this. You advocated for this. The federal government's own biosecurity board, though, recommended withholding the details of these experiments because of the danger the research posed. People were concerned that publishing it was publishing a roadmap to creating bioweapons around the world. But you sided with the gain-of-function scientist Fauci and argued that the benefits of publishing the research far outweighed the risks. You defended this avian flu transmissibility experiments as critical research. You wrote that even if a scientist became infected and triggered a pandemic, the benefits of the gain-of-function experiments outweighed the risk. In 2014, your agency, NIAID, began funding the Wuhan bat coronavirus work. In 2015, Ralph Barrick and the Chinese scientist Shi Zhengli published NIAID-supported research combining a bat coronavirus spike protein with a SARS backbone. The resulting virus could infect human airway cells. It's a novel virus that now can infect human cells. It gained transmissibility, it gained function. In 2018, the same group of scientists, EcoHealth, Barrick, Shi, and their collaborators submitted the diffuse proposal, which involved the insertion of a furin cleavage site into the coronavirus. DARPA rejected it as too dangerous. When COVID was sequenced, though, early on in January of 2020, within days, scientists discovered that, lo and behold, it had a novel furin cleavage site, just as had been proposed in the diffuse project. This is either an extraordinary coincidence.
I think that situates it for people.
I remember when they were discussing those novel furin cleavage sites when that first came out, and everyone was like, no, this was not engineered. And it's crazy to think that that was actually true, that discussion.
Right. So as I pointed out in my video from yesterday, which hit, I guess, every other stream, which is doing Fauci clips, and I didn't necessarily get my point across. This happened because basically we've been behind the curve in terms of science, in medical science in the United States for a number of years. We've agreed to allow and default to experts. We've stopped questioning. And the difference between what the president is doing and what all of this was about is that we need right now desperately to go out and find the new Elon Musk, to find the people who are the contrarians, to find the people who actually question science, who can then come up with the paradoxes that actually result in new discoveries. We need to become a nation of inventors and builders again. And that's exactly what the recently released science strategy during just this month by Michael Kratsios is designed to do. We're going to completely revamp all science funding to essentially do that search for those mavericks out there, the new Elon Musk, the new Einsteins, the new geniuses already out there in our society, despite what people think. There's lots of young people. If you looked at the people who are doing the new nuclear reactors, and you saw that in the president's office, they're all very young people. Okay, they really are out on a vision of new discovery, new frontiers, which is really what our country is all about. The Faucis of the world, the so-called bureaucratic experts who've ruined medical science for the last, COVID was the capper. Nobody trusts their doctors anymore. Basically people, question everything. And there's a whole industry which is selling you, come to me, I've got the cure for X. Forget about the medical establishment, all right? This has gone completely crazy at this point. And it's all based on what you can do to get away from actual scientific inquiry and mold public opinion, which is what the reason for all of these experts dates back to Walter Lippmann, a guy who was in the British Roundtable, and he actually said, here's what we're going to do. The public is too stupid to understand how reality works. What we've got to do is we've got to put the media, and he called them intelligence agents, which is what they are, between the experts and scientists and the public. And they'll interpret it for the public. They'll feed it to them in chunks which they will be able to understand. And that's what's happened with the media and everything else. And that's what Trump is in the process of destroying, as we've emphasized repeatedly here. It's not a question of the incident, the thing that happens on the internet, the daily dose of either black pilling or red pilling or what have you. It is the system which is the problem. It's the system of consensus, actually saying, okay, this expert says this, I'll go over here, and more people believe that, so I'll keep myself over here. And we lose in that process our own individual agency for thinking. And, that's really, what I was thinking about as I watched Fauci get eviscerated yesterday. And I just want to remind people that what Ron Paul did is the product of, essentially a couple years of intense investigation. It's not like, boom, you could have gone there and actually forced him to take the Fifth Amendment or get a pardon or anything else if the Congress hadn't acted like the Congress is supposed to act. It's the one instance in the last years that I've seen the Congress, the Senate, actually act like it's supposed to act. And they did a ruthless investigation, complete with subpoenas to everybody, everything, etc. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who wrote a whole book about Fauci, basically went into the servers inside NIH and found those diaries on 11 different servers. Think about that. That's, first of all, everybody asks, well, why did he write it down? Well, he's a complete narcissist, and he requires, constant attention to his own ego every single minute of every single day, even if he has to give it to himself. But, essentially, you have Bobby Kennedy Jr. to thank for that. But it's not like snap my fingers and, I put people in cuffs and we walk away. It's work. It's a lot of work. And, I am very optimistic, having seen that yesterday and having seen the product, that we're beginning to get through this entire mess. But it's deep because we're changing a system. And that's what people have to think about.
Thank you, Barbara. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on YouTube and on X.com. If you're on YouTube and you're enjoying the stream, please drop us a like. X.com, I think you can share our stream. Thank you, everyone. So, Susan, what do you have to say to the world?
Well, I think what Barbara just brought up in terms of manufactured consensus and the way the intelligence operations have run these Psy-war operations against the American population for decades and decades, that it has to be addressed. Yes, it's important to understand how they do that, but it's equally important and perhaps more important to understand how you break that. Because the bottom line in terms of all of this blackpilling, psyops, everything which is just omnipresent, especially in social media, and people have to be very conscious of that and guard it, is that you're in a controlled environment. You're in a world which they have defined, and that world never has anything to do with the actual physical universe. I mean, obviously, in the question of science, as Barbara described it, the consensus, the experts, had nothing to do with the way the universe was actually responding to what they were doing. And that's sort of a characteristic of this gods of Mount Olympus mentality that the elites and the oligarchy have. I set the rules of the universe. Well, I'm sorry, no, you don't. God does, and the physical universe does. So I wanted to say that because I want to take this opening discussion in a different direction initially, very quickly, because I think that it's extremely important for people's mental health that you are very focused on the physical universe, on the real world, and on the immediate political task in front of us. We are now less than 100 days away from the midterm elections. And the question of whether Donald Trump is going to be able to continue on his mission is going to be determined by what you all do over the course of the coming couple of months. So I want to turn to the rally that President Trump held in Milford, Michigan on Monday. I was fortunate to be there, and I'm going to share both a picture and then some of the excerpts from it. All right, well, am I sharing that, Adam? Is that
Yes, hold on. Let me wrangle StreamYard here. There we go. I have to remove that one and then add
all right?
that.
Okay. There I am at the rally. There's Donald Trump over my shoulder there in the corner. But what I want to do before I play a couple of excerpts, because what I want to show you is the impact that we at Promethean Action and Promethean PAC are having on precisely this process of intervening into the midterm elections around the question of the physical economy. So before I play a couple of short clips from a few people from that rally, I want to remind people that our political arm, Promethean PAC, is circulating a new half-page flyer. It's already in its fourth printing, I think, and it's only been out for like 2.5 weeks, which you can get by going to the Promethean PAC website, which addresses the economic revolution which Donald Trump is carrying out, reviving our industry, restoring our economic sovereignty by bringing manufacturing back. And in particular, I want to point to, this is side 2 of it. And here on the bottom, it says, feeling the blue state blues, the midterms can fix this. Because the back page of this flyer goes through the tremendous investment coming into the United States as a result of Trump's tariffs, foreign investment, which he's directed into the United States. And of course, if you're in a state like Michigan, like I am, you're not seeing any of this because you have insane Democrats running your state. Now, I raise that because, hold on a second, you can stop the share right there. I'm going to go to something else in a minute, Adam. I raise that because we have been taking this message, and in particular in the recent weeks, this half-page flyer to political events all over Michigan, talking not only to the grassroots base, but actually talking to the candidates themselves in terms of how they need to be channeling this as the actual message in the midterms. So I'm going to turn now to a couple of video clips that I made from the Trump rally to give you a sense of how this process works. Because what you're about to hear from 2 of Michigan's statewide candidates, Mike Rogers, who's running for Senate. Now, he is unopposed in our primary, which is next Tuesday. So he's already the anointed candidate. And then John James, who's running for governor. He's been endorsed by Donald Trump, but he has a primary next Tuesday. So, and don't ask me how that primary is going to turn out. I don't know the answer to that. But aside from who wins that primary, I want to play these clips for you because I want you to hear how these candidates are now very, very much channeling. Hang on, I'm going to a different. Adam, pull the screen share down because I got to go to my own computer. Okay. I want you to hear how these candidates are now beginning to channel our message.
And what was the result in that quarter century of total Democrat monopoly in the United States Senate for Michigan? We've lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs. We have the highest utility rates. The average homeowner now in Michigan for the first time is 40 years old. And here's the worst of all of them. We went from top tier in education to 45th. Over half of our 4th graders can't read in the 4th grade. And I'll tell you this, the president is doing his part. You look around the country, they're scoring some big wins in manufacturing. General Motors is doing its part here for us. Thanks, GM, for being part of the reshoring movement right here in Michigan. Unbelievable. But I tell you what, we got to send President Trump some help. I think we should send the first Republican in a quarter century back to help this president, help our manufacturing right here in the great state of Michigan. And I'll tell you what, when we do this together, our kids are going to read again. We're going to get defense industrial base work back here again. We are going to make sure there's shop in every high school. We are going to grow opportunity. We're going to bring our prices down. And I will tell you this, if you believe, like I do, that this is the time for change, to change that quarter century of a managed decline managed by our two Democrats, this is the time that we will stand up and get Michigan up off of her knees. We will be the envy of manufacturing around the country again. And with your help, we're going to make it happen.
The president is the best deal maker the planet has ever known. President Obama has got $19 trillion invested back in the United States of America. But because of the failed policies of Gretchen Whitmer, a lot of that investment's not coming back here. We're working with you, Mr. President. We're going to make sure that we have an environment where we can bring that investment back to the state of Michigan, create jobs right here for the best auto workers in the world. Thank you so much for your
Okay, you can pull that down, Adam. Let me tell you something. Candidates were not campaigning on that message in 2022, and we lost Michigan big time. I can also tell you that in other parts of the country, Republican candidates are not yet campaigning on that message. And that is our job over the next less than 100 days. This is the message that we have to get out, because this message speaks to the independents, the blue-collar workers, the Democrats who are not communists, the people who want the kind of economy where one blue-collar job one blue-collar income can actually support a family. So I wanted to start with this before we get into all of the very hot, incandescent topics that are out there, because we always have to keep in mind, this is the mission, this is where we're going, this is an economic revolution, and this is what ultimately addresses all of the very real challenges facing Americans. Including the fact that we haven't automatically squeezed inflation out of the system. We haven't automatically rebuilt our beef herds, which takes 5 to 7 years. All of the questions of the physical economy, which take time to rebuild, but we can do it if we secure the midterms and if we continue in this direction. And it demands that more people are talking like these two candidates spoke at Trump's rally in Michigan. So that's how I wanted to start.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Barbara. And thank you to everyone joining us on YouTube and X.com. Now's the time to vote in a poll here, but it does seem like SAVE and the Save America Act and election security in the midterm elections, I'm sure the midterm elections as a whole is what people are reacting to here. So we're definitely going to take that next. But let me start first with some super chats here. So thank you, Melody Hart, for joining us this week. Thank you for joining us every week. And Susan, I know you're not on the show. I'm at the beach, but wanted to get the donation to you. I'll watch later. Thank you for all you do. No need to mention my name. Just keep up the good work. Thank you, Susan, for joining us. And we hope you enjoyed the show. And Diva Dora, thank you for joining us again this week. Appreciate you coming by, and make sure you're subscribed to our free newsletter if you're not yet already. The link for that is in the description. All right, so let's go directly to the question on the Save America Act that I had loaded up here, and then we have some questions on the midterm. And I know we were trying to save this for later, but let's take things a little bit out of order today. Okay, so Save Act specifically was 39 and 40. So these questions here that I'm about to pull up on the screen are coming from our email newsletter subscribers. 39. Okay, so let me pull off this widget here. Okay. Mike says, several people are talking about Collins flipping on the Save America Act. But with the McConnell and Graham situations, is there any chance the votes are there? Derailing two Georgia senators will take time, and the lawsuits will be enormous. Clearly, voter integrity is key. But the other issue that came up this week was that non-citizens are being allowed as election workers. This might be worse than letting them vote. Cheers. Thank you, Mike, for your question and for your concerns. And we have one from Chris. What is the status of the Save America Act and a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate? So thank you, Chris and Mike, for your questions. Barbara and Susan, Save America Act in the Senate.
Well, presently what's going on is that you've got to basically get rid of the filibuster in some way, either through reconciliation, which is the process which, basically is trying to be established right now, or, actually doing the right thing, which would be to get rid of the filibuster since you have the majority. And as the president keeps pointing out, if the Democrats get in power, that's the first thing they're going to do. Because, basically you have a very split Senate at this point. So, I think Darlene Graham is a vote, obviously, for the Save America Act. I don't think that's going to change very much. And the issue of whether McConnell is alive or dead, or what the hell is going on with him, is a deep mystery. But, if indeed any one of these things can be made to work in terms of reconciliation, getting around the parliamentarian, and I keep pointing out all these roadblocks to people, then, basically it's very possible that you could get a vote with J.D. Vance coming in to actually carry the difference. I am not banking on it in terms of what we've got to do around the midterm elections. And as we keep emphasizing in this space, all of the stuff around election integrity is like one of these, problems which Joe Biden left us like big piles of cow dung that we've got to basically get out of the way in the process of getting to reality and what we've got to do. But again, Susan and I keep saying 2024, we had worse election security probably than we have now. We've gotten rid of a whole lot of illegals. Many of them, because of the immigration stuff, are going to be very afraid to actually have their names attached to mail-in ballots at this point. But the key thing, the very critical thing, is too big to rig. And I'm going to add another caveat here. The most important thing is do not get black-pilled by the enormous, huge psychological warfare operations that are going on to make you think my vote will not count anyway, so what the hell? And not only that, I'm pissed at the president about this, that, or the other, which I see all over the internet. You've got a whole lot of people who were really, like, in many respects, like Anthony Fauci, to be blunt, out for themselves. Alex Jones is now calling for the president to be removed under the 25th Amendment. All right. All of these various, cyber operations, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, the entire, Rubio versus Vance dynamic, Israel has taken over our government. All of this stuff is pure cyber, and it has, Tom Luongo calls it Operation Demoralization, which is exactly a right name for it. And people have to just basically look at that and think about it and say, as Susan said, my task is to get the people who are running to talk about what the president is actually doing and to make it clear to people that we're in a revolutionary economic situation, not a socialist or communist revolution. All right. We're in a revolution which is based on the American system the same way 250 years ago we launched this experiment, which was a brand new way of doing economics. And people don't really know very much about it because it's been systemically wiped out of our public consciousness. So, that's how I really answer the question.
You're muted, Susan.
Yes, I am. I'll add another aspect to it. Again, it constantly comes back to this question of there is a real world out there, outside of chatting on this thing, okay? And that's the world that Donald Trump lives in. That's the world that Donald Trump is acting on. Now, it's like a war. And as my friend retired General Blaine Holt always says, in war, the enemy has a vote. So whether the enemy is Democrats in the Senate, rhinos in the Senate, the courts, the media, whatever, wherever it has ensconced itself, they have a vote, and they will continue to do everything they can to stop Donald Trump. And people wave their hands, say, why don't we have arrests? Why doesn't the Republicans in the Senate do this? Why don't they do that? Well, all right, you explain to me how you're going to get them to do that. Don't wave your hand, and say Donald Trump has a magic wand and he gets them. You explain to me how you're going to get these entities to stop blocking the president of the United States. So if you're approaching this from the standpoint of the real world, where you have enemy forces out there who are going to block Trump where they still have power, and we have to take away their power, and that's where the midterms come in. But then you say, all right, well, that's the battlefield. I wish it was a nicer battlefield, but it isn't. That's the battlefield. How do you fight on that battlefield? Not in some imaginary battlefield in the blogosphere or in, Candace Owens or Alex Jones' head. Somebody in the chat wrote, Alex Jones is a clone of Alex Jones. Yeah. And if anybody hasn't seen Ace on American Fire do his Alex Jones impression, it's damn good. So let's take the question of election integrity and what we're facing, and the fact that on this battlefield, we may not get the SAVE Act. And guess what? Even if we pass it, it won't go into effect for this midterm. Hello. Okay. So that's your battlefield. So what do you do? Well, what did Trump do? He went on national television. He made a big election integrity address where he identified the cover-up of the vulnerabilities in the system. Obviously, the illegal voters voting. Obviously, the cybersecurity issues. And then the next day, his Homeland Security Secretary, Markwayne Mullins, gave a follow-up saying, we have now identified these things, these vulnerabilities. Obviously, nobody wants these vulnerabilities in your election system. So we are going to work with every single state to plug these vulnerabilities. We're going to help you clean the voter rolls. We're going to give you the tools to plug this cybersecurity question. And again, people say, I want paper ballots. I want to get rid of the, voting machines. Well, I'm sorry, bucko, you're not going to have that by November. So again, let's fight on the battlefield that we have. And so he put a big Markwayne Mullins put a big spotlight on this. And what did he say? He said, but if you don't work with us, number one, your states aren't going to get any funding for running federal elections, which cost a lot of money. And number two, if you don't work with us, and then we see that these vulnerabilities compromise the election, we are coming for you. We are coming for you with fines, and we're coming for you with jail sentences. And what happened in less than 2 weeks after that? Suddenly, the Democratic governor of New Jersey discovers thousands and thousands of illegals on the voter rolls and says, we're going to take care of this. Now, is it more than that? Probably. But there's a point that I want to make here, which is what Trump and Mullins did in that 1-2 punch on election integrity, is they said to people, we're coming for you. You are no longer protected. And they're not only sending that message to governors, they're sending that message to all the little worker bees who get hired by the Democratic Party, who go to places like here in Michigan, the infamous TCF Center, where in 2020 you had the vans coming in at 4 a.m. in the morning and the pizza boxes on the windows so that nobody could see what was going on and so on. You're saying to all those little worker bees who've always been protected when they do this shit, you're not protected any longer. You think you're going to be protected? You're wrong. And so you're going to create a certain level of attrition of people, even at that bottom level, who are going to say, do I really want to go to jail for this? Do I really want a multi-thousand, $10,000 fine to do this? Maybe I just will play by the rules this time. That's how you fight. You attrite your enemy's ability to carry out their policies. You may not be able to eliminate it, but you attrite it. You cut it down. And then you do what we constantly say, which is you make it too big to rig by inspiring people with the fact that we are in a great moment in history. And the black pilling is there to prevent you from seeing what a great moment in history we are in, and that we have to finish this revolution.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you to everyone in the chat. I'm going to take a few super chats here from our wonderful audience. First, Josh, thank you for joining us every week. I just moved out to the West Coast. I've been up to New England plenty of times in my life, but when I take a trip back to New England, I'm definitely coming to your pub there, brother. The neighborhood pub I own on Cape Cod became a speakeasy during COVID, and our local police protected us and were our biggest patrons too. That period of time began my quest to find the free thinkers of Promethean action. Susan and Barbara should be in the cabinet. Thank you very much for your support. Josh, thank you so much for joining us and we love having you here. And Mother of Pearl, same to you. And let this be a good example. Susan, you were just talking about throwing up the black pill that the internet's trying to get everyone to swallow. Missing next week due to travel, but received my 100 pack ads to share all throughout the Midwest, planting seeds every day. It's even taken root with my 21-year-old who said, I'm mostly middle, but I lean right. Promethean action information is pure gold. Heads on a swivel. Thank you, Mother of Pearl. Barbara, Susan, any I think this is really important to get a sense that you can actually have a positive impact on your family and the people of those that live around you.
Well, that's the point of talking about the American system of economy, because now you're in a place where most people's heads don't go because they're in this controlled environment. Okay, and they don't know what's really going on. And now you get into, particularly with the rise of the DSA and the Democratic Party becoming effectively communist, people's heads are really twirling, say what this is about. And particularly with young people, they say to themselves, well, look at what happened in 2008. Look at that kind of situation with capitalism, where essentially Wall Street and all of these big banks got bailed out, and everybody who's in the middle classes and the working class actually lost their houses. Look at the situation Mike Rogers was talking about, this controlled decline under capitalism, so-called, all right? What you're now in a position, if you understand the American system, to tell people is, hey, have you heard about the fact that there's a really different kind of American economics that has been, basically written out of the history book since McKinley? And that's what Trump is actually doing? And that's why they want to kill him? Do you actually know about this story, which is the most important story? And I guarantee you, you're in a universe which even people who you think hate Donald Trump are going to say, wait a second, what is that about? What are we actually doing here, which is so different? And J.D. Vance in particular, if you look at his various speeches and everything else, really, if people understand that, he's talking about what he calls the science of Christian economy, not because it's specifically Christian only, but it actually has a resonance with Western civilization and Judeo-Christian Western civilization, which is important to note because this whole campaign against Israel's recent, government is actually erasing a very critical part of that 1-2 punch called the Judeo-Christian civilization, which you can bring Islam and everything else into if you actually understand the highest principles of Western civilization, which J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are operating on. It's a different discussion, in other words. It's much more elevated, much more touching the human side of everybody than what you get when you go swimming in the poison of the internet. So that's basically what I'd say to that.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Mother of Pearl, for joining us every week. Karantov, thank you for joining us. I was in London last week. I visited Chatham House and talked to a couple of interns there. I asked them what it was like to work at Evil Incorporated. It would have been funny if you I don't know if they would have let you if you could have brought in a smartphone and done, a little bit of video from that would have been funny. Thank you for joining us. Yeah.
If you took any pictures of it, at least externally, please share with us. We'll see if we can pick up the aura of evil around it.
Thank you, brother, for joining us. I have John. Your updates this week were superb. First, Susan stressing the need to look deeper to find the forces behind the news. Then Barbara displaying that depth in her comments about the Fauci hearings. Any thoughts about this one, ladies?
Well, as some people say, praise will get you everywhere. No, just kidding. We try very, very hard to, counter the narratives out there by causing people out there to really question what the environment is they're living in, and to, really become it's 250 years ago. And you actually think about our founders. I very much like Roger Stone's piece, which is up on his X, trying to think about the night before the signing of the Declaration of Independence, what was going through everybody's minds, because they didn't know how it was going to come out. They were basically saying, hey, we're revolting here against the most powerful force in the entire world. And they knew they were right, but they had no notion of how anything was really going to go down or happen, except they knew that they were going to be driven by a certain intellectual and spiritual righteousness. And that's really, in some sense, where we're all at right now. And it's very useful to really, really think about that mindset. You're in a war. You don't know how it's going to turn out. People can predict, but as Susan said, the enemy has a vote. The only thing you can do is get off the couch, go out there and organize your fellow citizens to be citizens at this great moment in history. Friedrich Schiller said about the French Revolution, which was supposed to turn out like the American Revolution, but it turned into a bloodbath. There's lots of things you can say about that. You can talk about the fact that the British ran it exactly to suppress the American Revolution from coming to Europe. But the thing Schiller said, which I think is most relevant, is he said, a great moment in history found a little people. And that's something I always try and keep in mind. I try and actually challenge myself all the time to go deeper, to go farther, to go beyond, what I'm comfortable with. So I think that's the mindset which people have to have.
Excellent response, Barbara. Thank you very much. And thank you, John, for sending in your comment there. We really appreciate having you on our show today. We probably know this, but if you're not yet already, please, anyone who's listening to the show right now, we have a free email newsletter. We have both a weekly and a daily subscription. I am currently have plans to turn this into a much stronger political product for all of MAGA. We have over 100, I think we have like 160,000 actual people getting our newsletter. The link, if you would like to join our free newsletter, the link is in the description. You can sign up for free if you'd like to give us a $10 monthly contribution. Again, sign up on our newsletter. You'll be prompted if you'd like to give us a $10 monthly contribution. So thank you very much, John. I'd like to give a shout out here to Joy Foster. I'm sorry I can't pull up the super stickers. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel here. Love having you here. And can do, know how. Good attitude. I like that. Can do, know how. That's the kind of attitude we need back here in the United States. Thank you very much for joining us. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. All right, so for the next set of questions, we're actually going to go to this discussion now of communism and a DSA that's coming into the United States, because I think that's a very good counterpose to the Save America Act. And then we can discuss the Senate a little bit more. So question number 43, we go. We got close to 300 questions in the past 2 weeks here. Okay. So these next 4 questions are going to be at communism and a DSA threat in the midterms and in the next presidential election. So Patricia says, America is so great. She actually allows people to hold communist beliefs even to the detriment of our union. Is it time to test the Communist Control Act of 1954? Thank you for your question and comment, Patricia. I think a lot of people have that same kind of thought. Robert says, can you please do a video on all the known ways that the left and the like are trying to start a civil war? Is that the free movie Citizen Vigilante pushed by the left or the right? Also, do you think that said movie and other tactics could incite Americans both on the left and the right to start a war? I think they're certainly trying to do that. And also if those tactics could succeed in starting this war. Thank you for putting out very informative, misleading, as well as fine news in a very digestible manner. Sincerely, Robert. Thank you, Robert. Patricia again says, America is so great. Okay. I pressed the wrong button there. Janetti says, is the Communist Control Act of 1954 legitimate? Thank you. And Rock says, is there a way to stop communism from taking hold in the United States? And if they were already entrenched, how can we combat the states that do? Thank you very much for your question. I think these questions right here is in the back of everyone's mind, especially if you have a family, you have young kids, you have children in your family, grandchildren in your family. This democratic socialist of America is what's in the public schools and in the popular culture. Barbara and Susan, what do you say for this new rise of DSA type communism in the United States?
Well, I think that the American system is the cure. I point out to people that the one thing that Karl Marx attacked more than, British capitalism was the American system by name. Okay, he went after Friedrich List. He actually saw that as his major enemy in many, many, many respects. Look, these are all intelligence operations. They're little, think about it as little intelligence cults, which are built up based on popular dissatisfaction with the present system. Young people in particular, the virulent, part of the thing with the DSA is, if you listen to their platform, what are they trying to do? They're going to overturn the Constitution of the United States. They're blatantly clear about that. They're going to basically institute the globalist regime, because that's what they stand for. Green ideology, neo-Malthusianism, all of this stuff, which the Biden administration and the Democratic Party were pushing. And quite frankly, it's just a natural extension of what the Democratic Party under Obama and Biden have been pushing as their notions of humanity. At the center of it is the question for young people, who are we? What is humanity? Are we animals who have like a social contract where essentially if we just live, we get the goods redistributed to us as opposed to the people out there who are actually building things and everything else, and make it all equal? Or are we a society which actually grounds itself, which is the American system, in human creativity, in a grand mission for life, to actually be able to say to your kids, I did something here in my generation which is going to make your life genuinely better and more creative and more human. All right. And that's the difference between the American system and any form of communism. Now, the DSA is particularly bad because they see a vulnerability in our culture. There's a guy by the name of Gramsci, and I'm going to be doing a bit of a pamphlet on him, Antonio Gramsci. His prison writings actually reinvented Marxism at a point where it had really died out, all right? Because everybody was saying, well, Marx says it's supposed to be that all of this industrialism, the industrial age, is going to lead to communist revolution all over the place. And Gramsci said, no, it's actually failed. Marxism has actually failed. There haven't been the revolutions in Europe which Marx talked about. And how do you account for that? Well, he said, and this is what the DSA is really all about, it's just the latest iteration of something which started in our country in 1971. All right, when you actually had a deliberate effort to kill the scientific and technological culture, the curiosity about the world, which made America the land of invention and frontiers, and in a certain sense, permanent revolution. All right, in a different sense, in the sense that we're always striving to make life better for the next generation. And he said, the reason why Marx failed is you've got to destroy the belief in God. You've got to destroy Christianity. You've got to actually overtake the culture and become the hegemon in terms of the culture. Now look at this thing in terms of everything we see right now in our culture. The fixation on sexual identity, the fixation on racial identity, the fixation on, basically, quite frankly, saying that there's no line between a criminal and a normal person. There's no morality which you can actually think about and talk about, which is universal. All right, that's the thing which is really at the heart of what the DSA is doing. They consciously say Gramsci is our hero. All right, he is the guy we actually address as a theoretician rather than Karl Marx. All right, now, the Communist Control Act was all about the war between the Soviet Union and the United States, which is called the Cold War. It didn't cover and could not cover the insidiousness, which I'm actually talking about now, of an attempt to destroy the culture. In order to talk about defeating it, you've got to be able to define our American culture. What is it? What's positive about it? Why do we all basically tremble when we hear Lee Greenwood and Donald Trump, despite the fact I don't like country music, say I'm proud to be an American, right? What is it deep inside of us which we actually identify? We have to be able to articulate that. And the thing they took down, the thing they hate, is this idea in the American soul of new frontiers, being the maverick, thinking outside the box. All of those things are essentially what our founders put into our culture through the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Since 1971, that has been constantly eroded. Instead, we have this irrational cult called environmentalism. We're not like obeying the command of Genesis to go forth and actually create more of us and subdue the earth. There's too many people. We have all of the crazy things at the heart of an alien culture. And that's what we've got to really recoup and recover. And what Susan is talking about in the American system, what we're talking about in terms of becoming a nation of builders and inventors again, is deeply embodied in the American soul. So that's how I'd answer the question, is you basically have to recognize the war and the battlefield for what it is.
Yeah, and I'll also add, because I think it's extremely important. I mean, look, you can tell from Barbara, the color of Barbara and my hair, we're boomers. Adam's a generation or so behind us. But especially our generation, the millennials, sure, you can go out and make an argument. You can say, look at history, look at how bad communism is. That is just not going to get you anywhere, honestly, with a 19-year-old, because that 19-year-old is going to sit there and say, look at how bad the globalist system, which has destroyed my family and my future. Look at how bad that is. I've lived that. That's my experience. I haven't lived through communism. I'm prepared to believe the fairy tales about what it's going to give me, or democratic socialists or whatever. So you have a number of people who are saying very clearly, and I think this is extremely important, you can't just, doesn't mean you don't attack it, but you can't just attack what is wrong with communism and the DSA. J.D. Vance has said this. He said it in his interview with Joe Rogan, where he said there's a Christian form of economics, which is not communist, and it is not hardcore free trade libertarianism, which says anything goes and however you can make money works. Right? Those are the two binaries that they want this debate to stay in. And so what Vance has said is there's another kind of economics, and in a variety of different interviews, he's very clear. It's Alexander Hamilton. It's protecting the productive base of your economy, both by protecting your manufacturing and by protecting, through tariffs, the living standards of your population, of your workforce. And I think that's extremely, extremely important. One thing I fear is that the genuine threat of especially the DSA, because it is out there and it's winning primaries, and there's no question that they're getting a certain kind of political traction among certain layers, and it looks like some of them will be joining their crazy cohorts in the Congress come January. But that sometimes it hits me. It's like red meat for the lunkhead Republicans, who are then just going to run their campaigns purely on, the communists are coming. The communists are coming. I'm a boomer. Barbara's probably going to remember this. There was really a hysterical movie in the 1960s called The Russians Are Coming. The Russians Are Coming. It was hysterical. And but it kind of captures what I'm talking about, because if you're not going to also say, address what attracts a young person, if they're trapped in this binary between Carl Schwab's globalism and communism, and by the way, communism and globalism come from the same place, which is oligarchism and British imperialism. But if they're trapped in that, you're not gonna convince them by cataloging the crimes of, Lenin in Russia back, over 100 years ago. So I think this question of the actual alternative of an American system, the harmony of interests, as Henry Carey, who was Abraham Lincoln's economic advisor, and whom Karl Marx attacked in a footnote. He attacked Henry Carey and the American system because when the pie is growing based on actual industrial growth, you can have a harmony of interests. You have a harmony of interests between an industrial worker and a manufacturer. What is the harmony of interests? They want to be able to produce more, produce it more efficiently, have a more productive workforce, which means a higher standard of living. That's the harmony of interest. Now, within that, are there going to be fights between unions and management? Sure, why not? I mean, we used to have a time when unions actually defended the living standards of their workforce. There aren't too many left that do that. But that's within the context of a growing pie. And that is the question of the American system. I'll come back to a quote from Scott Bessent that I return to over and over again, where he says, the Democratic Party strategy is to compensate the loser. See, that's the environment in which communism and the DSA operate. You're a loser. And so we're going to make you lose less, by taking some money away from somebody else. But as Bessent says, he says, I don't think the bottom 50% of, and communists, Democrats, DSA, they want you to stay in that permanent loser category as a victim, as a consumer. And what does Bessent say? He says, they're not losers. It's the system that was rigged. And we are going to change the system. So I think it's extremely important, because if people fight communism by trying to defend the system that most people have lived under until Donald Trump came along and brought back the American system, you're going to lose. And those kids are going to go to the dark side.
Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. Thank you to all of our friends in the chat and watching the live stream. Another quick shout out here to Paul Trainer. Thank you very much for being here, brother, and joining us every week. Okay, we have plenty more questions here. We are going to get to the Iran war, but I feel like we built up so much momentum on the midterm dynamic that I want to stay on that for just a little bit longer. So we're going to jump to this question next on the Senate and what's really going on here. 37. Yes. Okay. There we go. How are things looking for the midterms? We should be concerned if they recess for August, leaving us only 6 weeks to get it done. Thank you, Karen. And Mary said, when will the Republicans start calling for voting that is too big to rig? When will the Republicans start screaming that this is the election that could finish off the Democrats if we, the people, get out and vote, making the election too big to rig? It seems like the Republicans have given up on winning. Thank you, Mary, for your comment on concern. We've addressed this again, but I think we still need to keep talking about this. Where do the Republicans stand on this issue of too big to rig? Barbara and Susan.
Well, I think it's somewhat different in every state. We work with people in Texas. We work with people in North Carolina. They're struggling to get their candidates to really focus on the winning message, which is that it is Donald Trump's economic revolution, which is at the top of the ticket. And I understand why people's knees are wobbly, right? The conflict with Iran is not settled. Gas prices have bounced back up above $4 a gallon. This affects people. This hurts people. The instability caused by all of this, which is necessary, and we'll get back to this later, has created a situation in the economy where a lot of people's food prices are not going down, and in some cases are still inching up. I mean, some commodities have gone down. We all know eggs are like 1/5 of what they were. Milk has gone down. Other things have gone down. Stop and think. These are things that you can actually produce. You can produce eggs pretty quickly. You can't produce a beef herd very quickly. But there are a lot of those distortions in the economy, and people are genuinely hurting. So if you're a summer patriot, sunshine soldier kind of Republican, you say, oh, yeah, people are hurting on the economy. I don't want to touch that. No, that is fatal. We have got to draw people into this new future of the United States as a manufacturing superpower, which is coming. As Mike Rogers mentioned in the video I showed at the beginning, GM just brought 2,000 jobs from Mexico back to Texas. Honda is bringing a huge amount of jobs back. U.S. Steel, in its new partnership with Nippon, is going to be modernizing the Mon Valley Steel facility as opposed to shutting it down. They're going to be modernizing it. That's going to be 6,000 workers. This is just the tip of the iceberg of what is beginning to come into the United States. We have to organize people's minds into that future. And people who are afraid to do that, I really wonder how they would have fared as a soldier in the American Revolution. You know, there was a 5-year period of time where we hadn't won. And we didn't know if we were going to win. But you fought for a future, which you knew was necessary for yourself, for your posterity, and for mankind. You fought for that future, even if you didn't feel it while you were freezing your feet off in the winter in George Washington's encampment. We have to inspire in people that kind of sense that you're fighting for a future which you may not be benefiting by today, but is worth the commitment, is worth the fight. That's how, in my book, that's how you make it too big to rig.
It's that Valley Forge mentality, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Philadelphia, so yeah, that lesson of Valley Forge was at least when I was in the Philadelphia public school system. They really did talk about Valley Forge a lot. Barbara, your thoughts on too big to rig? I know this is a refrain that you always come back to.
Well, you know, it's very concrete for those of our listeners who are imbued with Promethean action and really want to make us truly happy. All right. If you would commit yourself today to actually saying, I'm going to bring 10 to 15 people out to the polls in November to vote Republican, even if I have to hold my nose, because the issue is, if we have too big to rig, and I just want people to visualize this, right now, you know, there are key races which are very, very tight. You know, there are certain candidates who clearly are scared to campaign on the message of President Trump. What happens to the mindset of that candidate if Trump voters actually say, hey, bud, we're coming out for you and we're going to guarantee that you win? All right. But then you owe us. All right. You owe us because you won't have won without us. And you owe the president because you won't have won without his endorsement. That worked, you know, for almost 3 months. If you look at what happened on 2024, you know, most of Washington, D.C. was in complete shock after November of 2024. And pretty much the president was able to run an operation where executive order came down and things began to move again. Otherwise, as he says, based on what Biden did, we would have been in a depression right then and there. All right. So you see, you have a critical experiment to show you that actually works, except we have to expand it. We can't have margins. We've got to completely expand it. We've got to dominate, as Donald Trump likes to say. And we have to show them that all of the crap which they've done ever since November of 2024 hasn't worked, because the people, the citizens, who Ben Franklin says, you're the people who are in charge now, okay? You're the people who actually have the republic, if you can keep it, because the people basically are smart enough to realize that they're being played and to realize how to actually defeat the enemy. And that's the implication of too big to rig.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Susan, for your comments. Let's jump back to some super chats here. This is one from Melissa that I think we guys definitely have to endorse her idea here. Can I get everyone that has a Democratic senator or a senator that is pretending to be a Republican to call their senators every day to vote yes? On Save America Act, I'm sure. It pisses them off. But if everyone does it, they will get the message.
So true. I mean, there's lots of states which appear to be blue. The reality is you only got blue cities. All right. That's the actual reality politically. All right. So, you know, if all of those people who aren't brainwashed, and that still is the majority of the American population, in my belief, get off the couch and get on the phone, you create a lot of momentum, and you do it from a completely unexpected quarter. So 100%, Melissa, I agree with you.
Yeah, and just based on my own life experience, I did spend a few years in Washington, D.C., just doing some actual lobbying without a checkbook, but just trying to make contacts in Congress. And I know for a fact that, yes, if the constituency blows up an office's phone line, they keep tallies. The front desk people, they actually are instructed to keep tallies about what people are saying on the phone. Yes, if constituencies blow up a local phone lines, both in a district office and in a DC office, you get ringing phones off the hook. That absolutely does send a message to lawmakers. Susan, any thoughts?
That's it.
Nope. So thank you, Melissa. Yes, your instinct is absolutely right. Please make sure you're getting our email newsletter. Make sure you're on our midterm boot camp. We really need you in this fight. Thank you so much, Melissa. Greg, thank you. I can't pull up your super sticker. Please, thank you for joining us. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel and that you're getting our free newsletter. And Dave, let me just address your question. I'm late. Have you addressed the Federal Reserve? No, we have not yet. So I'm now going to pivot to Iran. We're going to have some discussion about Iran, and then we're going to talk about the economic issue. So stay tuned. We're going to be discussing that in this next hour. All right. So let's go back to what the video was supposed to be about, which is about what's going on with Iran. So I'm going to take question number 14 here, which I think is really, I think the same thing too. So let me just pull it up here. Move, add to stage. Okay. First one, yes, 14. So this next 4 questions here. Audrey says, I am concerned why President Trump continues to halt military actions and would try to negotiate with Iran when it is obvious that this regime will never negotiate. Every time they come with something worse. Now they are advocating the murder of his family too. Yeah, crazy. Shouldn't this signal that the present Iranian regime is not trustworthy and just want to keep themselves in the news? Thank you very much, Audrey, for your question and concerns. So many people feel this way. Young says, President Trump has given too many chances to make peace agreement with Iran, only give them more time to drag it on. Isn't it time for him to hit them harder without letting them know the target? Thank you, Young. Bruce says, if Iran's military has been destroyed, how are they still able to respond with drone and missiles? Thank you, Bruce. And Andra says, I do not understand why we are still dealing with Iran. We are told their military capabilities are wiped out, and yet they still keep bombing ships in other countries and even our own military bases. Yeah, case in point last night, a new round of missile strikes. Meanwhile, gas prices are going up again, and demon rats will use the economy against him in the midterms. Why not end it once and for all? Why not end it once and for all? Barbara and Susan, this is literally what so many Americans think. How do you address it?
Well, the question is, think about how would you end it once and for all? This is a nation of 91 million people, okay? It is much different than many, many other countries in the Middle East and anybody we've actually confronted before. The strategy of Iran and the Democrats and the media who are in an alliance, all right? I think that's the most important strategic fact to point out. The Democrats, the terrorists in Iran, and the media in the United States all are in an alliance. What's it about? How do we actually drag out this war so Trump loses the midterms? Just like an aspect of what we just found out about Anthony Fauci was about how do we actually get the American people so discombobulated and freaked out that we defeat Donald Trump in 2020. These are massive cyber operations. Now, what President Trump tried to do, and basically the neoconservatives on Fox News will tell you this is idealism, a ridiculous form of naive idealism, all right? What he's trying to do is bring peace to the Middle East so we can get the hell out of there, which we've been there for upwards of, as he likes to say, 47 years, ever since the United States and the UK created the present Iranian regime. That's a history which people have to take in and think about. The IRGC is an appendage of the City of London and the globalists, pure and simple. Terrorist states always are like that. And what we're fighting here in a proxy battle is the City of London and the entire globalist framework. That's the battle lines as I see it. It's not the way that Fox News or the neocons see it, because they want to say, let's just bomb them into oblivion. Well, we did that with Libya, and what did we do? We created a completely failed state in the middle of the Middle East. All right. The idea that Trump is doing here is he's fractured the actual Iranian political class into people who want to make a deal and people who want to be martyrs for religious fanaticism and the cult belief structure of the IRGC death cult. That it's a very unstable situation in which the people who want to be martyrs are still shooting. You can wipe them out in a certain way, but what you actually got to do, if you're thinking about it clearly, is strengthen the people who are trying to make a deal. All right. And, you can get very impatient with the process. That's why the president keeps saying, I have all the time in the world. All right. But the point that I'm trying to make here is the enemy we're fighting isn't just the IRGC. The enemy we're fighting is the media and the Democratic Party, which is on the IRGC side in order to demoralize you into not coming out for the midterms. That's their entire purpose. Do you have the stomach to actually stomach $4 a gallon gas, which is actually hurting you, Susan rightly says, for the larger goal of getting the hell out of the Middle East, and not only that, drawing huge amounts of investment, which normally would go to the City of London, into our country. All right, that's what the president is actually up to here. And, if assuming that you actually got an arrangement between Israel and the Saudis and the Abraham Accords implemented, we would be out of the Middle East with having made it better, as opposed to the record of previous presidents, which made it into the hellhole it actually is now for most of the people living there. And the entire 47-year ugly history of the Iranian Revolution. So we can't like just say, okay, we're going to leave. Look what happened in Afghanistan. If we just leave, you know, the Taliban took over, the drug trade flourished again, the whole thing is now in China's orbit, etc. That's not political reality. We can't just leave. We have to leave with having done really mission accomplished. And the mission is very different than the way it's being portrayed in either by Fox News or by the people who are actually the proxies for the Iranians in the Democratic Party. And the issue is very much, do the American people rise appropriately, knowing the real stakes here, and come out and vote in the midterm elections, which is the real objective of the war continuing. So that's sort of my take on what's going on.
Yeah, I would also add, people are not thinking in terms of what is an actual effective strategy. I mean, first of all, Donald Trump got elected because a whole lot of people saw endless, perpetual, completely destructive wars, and he is not going to do that again. So there was recently an article in Axios, which I was trying to find, or maybe it was, the article is in Axios. It's dated 2 or 3 days ago. And it's entitled, U.S. Officials Believe Sanctions Could Hurt Iran More Than Bombs. And there is a quote either in that article, or maybe I saw it on an X account, where they quote somebody saying, the IRGC is more afraid of Scott Bessent than they are the War Department, right? Because Operation Economic Fury is parallel to Operation Epic Fury. And Operation Economic Fury is very precisely tightening the noose around the IRGC itself, which does control a huge part of the Iranian economy. I think it's like 60% is directly under the control of the IRGC. So how do you address that? And this idea that, all right, we're just going to go bomb them all back to the Stone Age, well, again, it ignores the fact that I'm sure more than half of the Iranian population are just as victimized by the IRGC as the rest of the world. So how do you actually do it? And I think that's where the question of economic fury comes in. And it follows that narrow pathway by which we finally decapitate the evil which is running that country without physically destroying the country.
Thank you, Susan. And we're going to go on this issue. Barbara, you're raising the issue of the media. We got a question, somebody that was almost reading your mind. So let me pull this one up here. Continue our discussion here. Pull this down. Okay, so Gregory says, first, I want to thank you for bringing a fresh perspective to these long-standing issues. Keep up the great work. So when the media is clearly in bed with our enemies, how does this administration give the power of the pen back to the people? What about reinstating the no propaganda law? And should the administration start revoking FCC licenses if they refuse to show the American people that the mounting pile of voter fraud evidence, among other topics, like is what's being done with Fauci? We can only begin to win over the moderates if the U.S. media channels report in a fair and balanced way. Clearly, the media isn't interested in the truth. They are as treasonous as a collective. What's next? Barbara, thoughts on this coming off your discussion there, the media and the enemy?
Well, you got to support truth tellers. They're not in the media. Many of them are trying to make their way through creating channels on social media and elsewhere. And I hope we're educating you about how to judge them, how to actually judge people who actually dig for the truth. Some people who do excellent work, you won't agree with on every single aspect of what they do. I always cite Michael Tracy as someone who I find to be completely obnoxious, and, whose personality makes me want to, walk away, and who is against Trump. But his work on Epstein is truthful because he actually did the work of going in and finding and reporting in a true sense of a good investigative reporter everything that's going on. A lot of people who used to be good reporters, like Glenn Greenwald, are actually suffering from Trump derangement syndrome like crazy, okay? It's because they work in environments in which their money comes from the other side, to be blunt. Tucker Carlson has gone completely friggin' nuts ever since, Charlie Kirk was killed. And I think that has a certain portion to do with why he's gone so completely nuts. So the point is that yes, the FCC can be somewhat active in this, but the First Amendment is really quite important. And the way you defeat them is exactly why they're losing market share right now. I mean, people point to them as all powerful, but they're failing, as the president keeps pointing out. It'd be useful if we could basically run a significant pressure campaign on Fox saying, stop being British, stop being a British intelligence operation. You're the main conservative channel. Why don't you, cut the crap and realize you're in a war and actually present the president's perspective all the time? But that's up to people who watch it. That's you telling the Murdochs that, you're going to go and tell them to fly a kite, and you're not going to watch them anymore to the extent that they keep wanting to be fair and putting these idiots on. All right. That's recognizing that we're in a war. And, you got to actually deal with it from the standpoint of a citizen taking action, which you have a lot to do with. So, I think Elon Musk actually buying X, despite the fact that it's now got millions and millions of bots on it and all sorts of foreign influence operations and everything else going on, was extremely important as a blow against this entire censorship operation that was going on. And I think increasingly, the Fauci business, who was necessary in all of that, who knew to a certain extent what was going on and didn't cover it. They've shown themselves to be frauds, complete frauds, in the same way that Anthony Fauci is a fraud. But if you're paying attention to them, the only reason why we even look at them is because you have to, from what we call counterintelligence. What are people out there seeing that's screwing up their minds every single day that we have to address to get them back on track? That's the only reason why we look at them. It's like looking at pornography in a certain way. I mean, it's just a sewer out there in terms of the mainstream media. So again, it's actually looking at the people who are really trying to, wrestle with the truth. You may not agree with them. Glenn Beck, for example, is a good example. Constantly an honest guy, all right? You know how to recognize honesty. That's why you're here. We're trying to basically be as honest as we can, and we'll tell you where we think we don't know something if we don't know it. A lot of other people won't do that because they're paid to actually present a viewpoint. We're not. We're only supported by you guys out there. So the answer to it, which is the answer which our Constitution says is the answer, is more of the truth from our side all of the time, much, much more all of the time. Expand, expand, expand. And they become ridiculous because what they're saying is absurd. It's not in reality. The facts they're presenting are not in reality. And to the extent that we can do too big to rig in the midterms, we actually, it has effects well beyond the vote in the midterms. It shows that their operation failed completely in terms of what they're trying to do, which is to screw up your mind. And that's, how I'd address that.
Yeah, and as Barbara was talking, I mean, I was sort of thinking of my own mental processes, because I do have to look at what's going on out there and watch interviews on Fox, because there may be something that I might want to use, et cetera, et cetera. And I know, and I'm conscious of the effect that it has on my mind. But I think that the mental health tip that I'm going to give for today is in terms of when you are looking at things, or when you're even deciding what to look at, you have to start by asking yourself a question. What can I actually do about it? And parallel to that, what can the good guys, whether it's the president or maybe some people in your state, what can we actually do? Where can we move things that it's going to make a difference? And if anybody out there says there's nothing you can do, then you're in the wrong place. Go someplace else. But there, so because often people come to me and they say, well, what do you think about this particular topic? And I look at it and it looks like it may be an important or a viable topic. But then I also stop and say, there's really nothing that I'm going to bring to the table in terms of this. On this battlefield, there's nothing that I'm going to be able to do about this. I'm going to put that aside, and I'm going to keep focused on the things that I can do something about. And that is primarily getting across this economic message, this revolution, this hidden knowledge of the American system, so that people will settle down and recognize what the war actually is. It is a war between the American system and the British system. And we finally have a president and an administration which, for the first time in over 100 years, is consciously fighting for the American system. That's the front lines of the battle. So I just think in terms of when people are looking for where they're going to spend their mental energy, or they're looking for news, people to rely on, are these people on the front lines of the battlefield? Or are they just making crap up, which there's a lot, or they're on some battlefield which is secondary or tertiary at this moment in time? And maybe maybe you don't have the time to worry about that. So that's how I would start the process of trying to figure out who to listen to, which is why I think you're all listening to us.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Barbara. And thank you for everyone tuning in. If you've been enjoying this show here on YouTube, drop us a like, subscribe to the channel. Our next political briefing is going to be on Saturday. So drop us a like, subscribe, hit the bell icon. If people didn't know, we have a free newsletter. If you'd like to contribute $10 a month, the link is in the description. Let us stay in contact with you. Let's go back to some super chats here from our friends in the chat. So Alan says, and give a quick response to him here. One approach to fight communism: educate the new generation on what the Congress and Senate should be. Like Newt Gingrich's contract with America, keep it simple, pass a balanced budget, and no more continuing resolutions. Barbara and Susan, your quick thoughts on this? I think we need something that's a little bit deeper than just Newt Gingrich's contract on America. Your thoughts though on what it's going to take to actually defeat communism, especially when you look at the young people in the United States?
Well, the Congress used to be in charge of budgets. You're correct about that. However, a balanced budget ain't necessarily how you dig your way out of a complete collapse. And you got to recognize where we were under Biden. We didn't have industry. We had a culture which was dying. We had a educational system which was producing communists, quite frankly, and socialists. We had a bunch of people who were completely pessimistic. So you need to invest And for that, you need credit. You need to go back to what Alexander Hamilton talked about. I always recommend that people go back not to the contract with America, but to Alexander Hamilton's proposal for a national bank, and why he said what he said about credit. You need to give credit to the people who can revolutionize the economy. Yes, you can pick winners. You can. What metric do you actually use? Well, you use the metric of what it is that actually will present a different and vastly improved infrastructure platform. What we're doing right now, what we're inventing, which people don't know much about, is an entire new basis for economy. If we perfect fusion power, which the administration is very focused on, what does that mean? It means you have a completely different economy. You're no longer dependent on oil and natural gas. You have completely cheap energy produced for everything in the world at the highest possible rate of usefulness for energy. You can transform rocks into actual different components without having to mine for them. There's all sorts of possibilities out there. So it's not a question of what the Congress and Senate used to do is something called a capital budget, where they actually thought about how do we actually plan for the future? What's the priorities for our scientific and technological future for our economy? That's a capital budget. That's long-term planning. That's saying, where do we have to be in the next 20 to 50 years, and pulling everything we can to figure that out in terms of an economy which actually benefits everybody. That's a capital budget process. Instead, what Congress does now is exactly what most people will think about in terms of economic reality, which is, how do I extract the biggest bang for the buck in the present moment without really thinking about what it does to the future? That's the problem. And that's the problem we have to constantly get through to people. The continuing revolution or the continuing resolutions are just a disease of that kind of absolutely lack of planning. Or in the case of a Green New Deal and that entire budget and other inflationary program under Biden, because it actually was based on managed decline, as Mike Rogers said at the beginning of this program, you create a situation which nobody has the vaguest idea what they're even passing, which is what the continuing resolutions under Nancy Pelosi were all about, and actually effectively killed the economy and created a big roadblock for the Trump agenda, which the president is seeking to overcome. So that's how I'd answer the question.
Yeah, and I'd also add this to it, just as a way of thinking about Newt Gingrich's contract on America, because I know there's a lot of people who supported that, and probably there's more than a few of them listening to us right now. What was the problem? What was the underlying problem? He was pushing this policy, trying to balance the budget in a world, in an economy where we had already surrendered large parts of our economic sovereignty to the globalists, starting with the Federal Reserve, and then exacerbated in 1971 when Nixon took the dollar off the gold reserve standard. And then a series of policies throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, which culminated in NAFTA, where we gutted our actual physical base by turning everything into an income stream, whether it was for a globalist corporation that moved to Taiwan, or whether it was to big pharma or whatever. So you've destroyed your productive base. You've destroyed your actual revenue producing part of your economy. And then you turn around and say, all right, well, let's get a balanced budget. Honestly, that's like a family with 6 kids Mom and dad are both laid off. They have no income. And they say, well, we still have to balance the budget, so we're going to starve half our kids. That's not the solution. It's an easy kind of knee-jerk response to a larger systemic crisis. And it's that systemic crisis, because I agree with you completely, Alan, in terms of your basic premise. And you did put a question mark when you asked about Gingrich's contract on America. We called it contract on America, not with America. But your basic question is right. You have to educate the new generation in terms of how our Constitution, how the American system economy works. And it can't be dumbed down. I mean, it would be nice if you could slap a slogan on it. But you can't dumb it down, because if people don't understand the basic principles that differentiates the American system from communism, from British imperialism, from Keynesianism, from Milton Friedman, if they don't understand those basic principles, then there's no way that they're going to be able to hold Congress's feet to the fire or pick a better class of congressmen, which is constantly my point. Somebody way back in the chat, maybe an hour ago, made a very good point, and it's something that I said, but I don't think we had the reach when it was relevant for this election cycle. You need a better class of candidates. They said, we need to primary more people. Well, that's true, with a better class of candidates. So everybody on this call better start thinking about how they can organize a movement in their state so that they can build the support for and the understanding within a new class of candidates as we get into 2028. Yes, our immediate front line is the midterms, but you constantly in warfare are thinking about, all right, you win that battle, which we do have to win. How do we have to be positioned for the next battle so that we can win this war?
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for everyone tuning in. Econis, thank you for joining us again. Thanks, Susan and Barbara, for the war response, because the idea of the British is to slay Trumpism, which is right. He's tried to destroy not only Trump, but all the people that support him, his entire movement. Sounds like on the investment answer, Trump is going for a post-World War II Marshall Plan. What say you?
It's very clear that that's kind of what the Abraham Accords is based on. And it's not like we're just going there and doing charity. We're getting huge investment back into the United States, because all of the petrodollars from those Gulf countries for oil that used to go to the city of London are now coming here, right here. So that's a very astute observation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Barbara. And thank you, Econ, for joining us every week. Quick shout out to my own plans here. Yes, Adam, please make that as short. Barbara's explanation is truth in a nutshell. Thank you very much, Carol. So one of my plans now moving forward is, I tried to do this before, but I'm making a renewed push. I'm trying to increase the amount of clips, social media, short form, vertical video clips on all the platforms. I'm trying to find skilled clippers. If you're interested in working with me to bring Promethean Action's message to the world through clipping this content and all of our other content, please reach me on x.com, right there at AdamSturman23. Get in contact with me through x.com and let's see if we can do something together. So yes, Carol, I'm working with somebody else right now. So yeah, we're going to try and get some more clips out on the show today. Thank you very much for sending that in. I have another Carol. Thank you, Carol Sunday, for the super sticker. Thank you very much for joining us today. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Johan, thank you very much, brother, from across the pond. Thank you very much for your support. Consider getting our free email newsletter. The link is in the description. And finally, Zippity. Zippity, have you thought of posting on True Social? Yes, we have. Right now, we're only really seriously on YouTube and X.com, but we do have plans now to start posting more seriously on Facebook. I'm working with someone on Instagram, bring our message to Instagram. I know we also need to be hitting True Social. It's really a question of manpower at this point and building the systems to kind of get content on these platforms. The biggest problem with Truth Social is that they don't have an API, so we can't build something to post stuff on their platform. Like, we need to have either an AI agent or a human like manually posting their platform. So yes, we are working to getting a Truth Social presence. And thank you very much for bringing that up.
I do have a Truth Social account where I get very little traction so far. So anybody there wants to help boost it, at least as an interim, I'll pay more attention to it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Zippity, and thank you, Susan. Plenty of more topics here that I know we're just not going to get to cover, but let's continue on the theme of the Middle East. So we have two questions here. So Kevin says, for decades, Lloyd's of London's charged 20% or more for insuring the ships traveling through Hormuz, with no way to protect those ships, and yet the arrangement went on for years. The result was guaranteed higher oil prices, a quid pro quo serving both London and Iran. Trump breaking that arrangement ended a protection racketeering operation played out in plain sight. Would you agree? Thank you, Kevin, for your question and your comment. And Joe says, I was under the impression that the Lloyd's of London had ceased insuring ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and that the USA was going to underwrite these policies. I just learned that LOL is still insuring, Lloyd's of London is still insuring these policies and have jacked up prices sixfold. Confused in Oklahoma. Thank you, Joe, for your question and for your observation. Barbara and Susan, what's going on with these Lloyd's and the arrangements that are in place?
Well, I think what we're in a kind of transition, and the question is, both from the standpoint of something like Lloyd's of London, which has had a monopoly. The first questioner, I think, hit the nail on the head. It's had a monopoly, hiding in plain sight, in the sense that nobody ever thought about the fact that Lloyd's of London was one of the ultimate arbiters of the price of oil, because they had the monopoly on the insurance. What Trump did with his actions in the Straits is he forced this whole operation out into the open, where now everybody, like the two questioners, have just asked this question about this. And we have set up alternate mechanisms under Scott Bessent, which I'm sure, I haven't researched this. They may not be immediately in operation at this point. Maybe they are. I haven't looked. I will. But you're setting up, you're breaking the monopoly. So yeah, Lloyd's may be doing its thing, but the question is there an alternative either in place or soon to be in place where you're no longer at the mercy of the monopoly? And the other side of it is the actual price of oil itself. Because as we've pointed out, other people have pointed out, the price of oil is set on the Brent Futures Trading Exchange, which is in London, which is a bunch of people who never take possession of a barrel of oil. They're just out there trading on the futures market and setting the price for everybody, which is why many people ask the question, well, if we're now self-sufficient, how come our oil prices are being affected by what is going on in the Mideast? Because we sell our oil on the international market too. So the prices are set by the international markets, which is the Brent Futures Trading Exchange. There is another metric for the price of oil, and it's called West Texas Intermediary, WTI. The interesting question is, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if somewhere at the end of this process, you begin to see a shift in terms of the pricing of oil, again, not exclusively being monopolized by the Brent crude price, but that somehow this administration begins to get an alternative in there, perhaps with the WTI, which is much more connected to the actual production of oil as opposed to just manipulating the financial markets. So where I see this moving is in the middle of a war, you may not have all of these pieces in place. But where I see this moving is an administration which is very conscious of the fact that these British imperial outlets like Lloyd's, like the Brent futures market, these have monopolized prices in the world. And through the process of this action in Iran, you're creating the conditions to break that monopoly, whether it's broken at this moment in real terms. I can't give you an answer for that, but I clearly see things moving in that direction.
Thank you, Susan. Barbara, any thoughts about Lloyd's and the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, the other side of it is, obviously you have to basically, get around the fact that any terrorist entity of any kind in the world, including those deployed by intelligence services, can go into that strait, which has been vulnerable for 47 years now, and simply detonate a bomb on a ship, and then the insurance price goes up all over the place. So what's actually happening is that alternatives to the strait are being created by the Gulf states to get around the Strait of Hormuz and end the problem once and for all, which is where it actually has to go. And until then, the U.S. Navy is going to have to keep escorting ships through the strait and ensuring that some wacko can't blow up the entire world economy simply by putting a stick of dynamite on a ship.
Thank you, Barbara, for that perspective. Okay. Next question.
Someone asked what my truth account, SJ
Yes.
Kokinda, just like my ex account, SJ Kokinda.
Yeah, so thank you for addressing that. So Susan Kokinda's Truth Social is the same as her ex. It's at SJ Kokinda. All right, we have another question here, which I think Susan wanted to take on the economy. So let me pull that one up here, 47. Okay, Rob says, biggest issue right now is the economy. I like the direction Trump is taking, but it still sucks for a lot of people. The H-1B 100,000 fee got halted. Yet companies keep finding a way around it, paying workers about 30% less. Workers get stuck because it's hard to move. Attacking Iran was a dumb thing, a dumb timing. If it had to happen, do it after the midterms once the economy improved. People are out of patience. I know tons who are unemployed, and the official numbers are hot. Miss a lot of those, the 2026 surveys. Telling folks to be patient is easy when you can still pay the bills. Things are slowing down. I'm not energized to vote anymore. I voted in every election until I was 18, and I'm losing faith in leaders at every level, including Trump. What's the actual plan to jumpstart this other than just wait a little longer? Thank you, Rob, for voicing your concerns about the economy. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts? A lot of people have this viewpoint right now.
Well, I'll address it again from the standpoint that I already did. And look, be patient. Let's go back to that Revolutionary War soldier freezing at Valley Forge. It's not that we told them to be patient. It's that they understood what the mission was. They understood that the enemy was powerful, the enemy was evil, and that it was worth the sacrifice. So I think the answer to this question is very much a question of one's identity. Because if your identity is kind of as a subject, I'm at the mercy of all of these forces, maybe my king will do something about it and maybe he won't, you're going to get demoralized, and And we're going to end up, well, I'll get to that in a minute. But the other side of it, again, is if your identity is in history, and that's what I would really say, because this question of being patient is kind of odd. Again, people are suffering. People suffered at Valley Forge. People die in wars. They lose their lives. They lose their limbs. But if it's a just war, people understand why they are doing that. And I think that's the problem with the demoralization which is out there. People do not have an identity located in history. In a sense, 2024, because we had gone through the horrors of the Biden administration and everything that was taking us back to, people were energized in a very visceral, personal way to go out and say, this is nuts. I'm not going to live like this any longer. I'm voting for Donald Trump. And maybe I don't like his personality, which certainly was true for a lot of people. But that was just kind of an immediate reaction. This is a longer fight. This is a fight to reassert the real principles of this nation. It's a mission. And people are going to get hurt along the way as we fight for that mission. There's nothing else I can say about that, except that people have to rediscover their historic identity, or you want to put it in religious terms, their Christian identity. A lot of people have suffered over the millennia fighting for what they believe in because they understand that it's not about their own personal circumstances, as difficult as that may be. Now, granted, if somebody is a household head and is having trouble feeding their children, I absolutely understand the agony. But how are you going to provide your children with an actual future? And if you're getting demoralized and deciding not to vote, well, please just think through the consequences of that. Donald Trump is not doing everything you want him to do fast enough. So you're going to bring the Democrats back in? I don't know. My own brain can't follow that logic. So I would just suggest that people dig a little bit deeper into what the purpose of life is and make their decisions from that standpoint.
I don't want to, downgrade the question or the suffering which is out there. But you got to think about the fact that Steve Bannon and other people who people follow are actually saying exactly what the questioner is saying. Trump is not delivering. He launched a stupid war of choice, in essence, because Netanyahu runs him. That's not what the war is about, as I think we've emphasized in this entire broadcast. And there are just certain things you've got to do in history. If you face a situation in which a death cult, which has already said it's going to assassinate you and your family, is going to get a nuclear weapon. It's just kind of as simple as that. And it's just as simple as that for the president. It was a necessary action. He took it knowing that it could erode his support for the midterms drastically. You think he doesn't know that? You think he doesn't know everybody who's coming back to him and saying, you promised there would be no more war at all ever in the world again? Well, you have to ask yourself the question, are there just wars? St. Augustine says there are. Aquinas says there are. People recognize that a defensive war against something that could obliterate humanity is kind of necessary. All right. It's not the same thing as a war of choice, i.e., going into Iraq for a truly evil purpose, i.e., rejiggering the Middle East to make it more profitable for Britain and the United States, and overturning the last, whatever you may think about Saddam Hussein, he was the last nationalist government in the entire Middle East. That's who we overturned, and that was the reason why we did it. two very, very, very different purposes here. And people sort of stopped listening to Operation Demoralization. Recognize that that's what it is. It is a demoralization operation to produce exactly the impact which the listener states. I'm not going to vote. That's nuts. I'm sorry, but it is. It's really not thinking through clearly what this is about and listening to people who, as I said before, are part of the IRGC at this point. There's no distinction in terms of their goals. So that's how I'd answer the question.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Susan. I just want to reiterate the fact, right? That effect where Rob says, I am not energized to vote anymore. That phrase, that idea, that is the demoralization operation that Barbara is talking about. You're probably spending an incredible amount of time on social media where all these messages get put into people's heads, and private chat rooms where guys share less wholesome things and should be sharing more wholesome things between one another. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Barbara and Susan, last comments for our audience today. I think that was a pretty good way to end it, but any final things you want to leave our audience with?
Well, Adam, would you put the Promethean PAC URL up? Because for all of the people who are spending too much time in the blogosphere, or for the people who just say, all right, I'm energized, I got to act, we do a midterm boot camp on our sister site, Promethean PAC, which is our FEC-run site, which intervenes into midterm elections, unlike Promethean Action, which is a policy arm. Promethean PAC, every Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we conduct a national Zoom with activists all over the country, and we discuss, how do you message this message? How do you take on the challenge of transforming people's identities so that they're not losers and they're not victims, but rather they are actors in the future for this country? So I wanted to conclude with that call to action.
Perfect. So you can go to the website right here, and the midterm bootcamp link, if you're on desktop or a bigger screen, it'll be in the upper right-hand corner. If you're on mobile, you just press the menu button and the sign-up page. You should see midterm bootcamp sign-up. Barbara, any final words here?
No, Susan said it. You said it. I don't really have anything to add to that.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. We'll be on our regular schedule next week. We'll see you next Thursday. And thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in.